Work plays such a big part in our lives, yet most of us are really unhappy in our situations. Now, that doesn't really always come down to the fact that we're in the wrong job. It might be the way that the companies are thinking about their employees. In this conversation, Margaret takes us through an alternative way of working, something that releases the potential of all the employees and treats people as human. And that is such a big step forward. I hope you get a lot from this conversation. I certainly did. And Margaret is one of those people that can just explain all of this in such deeper terms and the benefits that come from it. She really was a fantastic guest, and I could have listened to her for a longer time. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Apologies for the preamble. I know I do go on talking about my own experiences, but I think it sets the context of the world that most of us experience. So I hope you enjoy, and let's dive in. Okay, so welcome to Vantage Point Conversations. My name's Colin Parsons, and for those of you who haven't been here before, I get to have very interesting guests on here, and I get to ask loads of questions, be curious, ask questions about things I know nothing about. Sometimes I know a little about it. Sometimes I might even know a bit more than I think I do. Um, and so welcome. And today my guest is Margaret Ricci. Am I saying it right?
Ricci? Yeah, it's a nice
Richie? Sorry.
Italian name.
Oh, nice. Are you Italian?
Not at all. I just got to marry one, so that was fun.
Ah, oh, nice. Very good. So, Margaret, my opening monologue is always the same. So, some people thought it was lazy me not introducing my guest, but I prefer to think of it that I don't think I would do the best job, and I don't want to just read your bio out. I know other people prefer to do that. I just like you just to take as long as you want, as little time as you want, just to explain who you are, any context, highlights, lowlights, anything you think you would like anyone to know about you. And then we
Mm,
just jump into the conversation from there.
wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for having me here for sure. So, I would I would try to talk about myself as a late bloomer. Um, I've been in corporate America for 40 years, and I started my college degree when I was 19, I think, just for 1 year, and then I had to split off and we had a family, my husband and I, and so we, did our family thing. And then I didn't get back into my college career portion until I was in my 50s. So I graduated finally with my bachelor's when I was 54, and then went back and got my master's, yeah, when I was 56. So I'm a late bloomer, and I'm coming to business from a different vantage point than most people do. I see the problems that we've had forever. And that's part of what fuels me is the fact that I think I can help change what we see in business that's not very um, well done, maybe. Valuing people, um, learning how to become exemplary teams, and then my latest passion is teal organizational paradigm, which is, of course, I'm wearing teal today to promote, and I have my nice picture back there. Um, so, which is another concept that we can talk about later, but that's at least an overview of me. I've been around forever. So,
Amazing. I love it. So I think selfishly, why I want to have this conversation is because I I had a corporate career. Um, And I worked in London for 19 years, moved to Luxembourg nearly 11 years ago. And I worked in the corporate setting for all of that time. And I don't know what the trigger was, but I started to realize there's very different ways of working and the ways that, so I always think about my dad. My dad's now retired. He went to work. Um, I think he took 1 week off sick. Um, his whole life, ever since I've known him, and that was purely because the doctor wouldn't allow him to go to work. I think if he could, he would have. And so I was brought up in a with a very strong, if I say strong work ethic, I don't know if that's the right way to describe it. It was just you go to work, rain, shine, whatever. And I didn't really sort of question that. And I've done that for all of my life. Um, but then I guess when we had our second child, I'd been doing consultancy work and I wanted to move away from that because I felt that the same things were happening, the same. So before that, I was being hired. I worked in operations in the background in finance for a long time. Then I moved into projects and then within the consultancy to sort of summarize it. And what I saw was the same problems over and over again. Um, and so the last job that I'd had, I went through this interview, and this interview was not strenuous, but it was like they really wanted to know a lot about me, was really interested in my specifics in terms of the things that I'd done before. And I felt like a great fit for them. And again, it was only a consultancy job. It was due to last for 6 months. And I was like, oh, okay. I felt very valued. I felt very seen
Mm.
in terms of, okay, yeah, they understand my value that I can bring here. And the reality was everyone was super nice, really great. But the reality was I was just almost like a bum on a seat. No one really wanted the thing that I thought that they wanted from me. And I think within there, there was some insecurities from myself. But when I showed up and in the interview and then the day to day, those two things were very different. And it felt, and again, people were super nice, but in the interview, you explained this. Yet when I was in the job, it felt very controlled, not in a nasty way, but but you've hired me for my experience and my expertise, yet
Yeah.
you're not prepared to let me try and do this. And I don't know if that was the contracting part of things. But it seemed odd that in contracting pays very well, and it seemed I couldn't quite reconcile in my head. You seem to want all of these skills. You've asked me for this, yet when I'm here, you try to control or put everything into neat boxes of this is how this is this person, etc. And I felt very constrained. And this wasn't the first time I'd felt that. I'd experienced it in many ways, and I'd often felt I was always, as an employee, kind of, it wasn't about me, it was about what the work wanted for me. And even when I tried to push, and I'm not blaming all the corporates for all of that. I think, again, it came from some insecurities within me. But I never felt free to kind of go and explore this. It always had to be a certain way, a certain path. Okay, you need to do this training course. You need to be this way. If you have, yeah, you might be good at these strengths, but let's focus on your weaknesses and, try and bring those up to the same level as your strengths. And I felt very, strangely enough, I'm thinking about your picture in the background there. I felt
Oh,
like in the sea, I never felt quite calm. And there were moments and and I don't want to beat up on corporates because there were moments where I absolutely learnt a ton, and I think it's a great sense. But sorry, it's a long, long
no, that's
conversation
good.
I'm saying here. But what I felt is just actually I wasn't being myself, or I wasn't allowed to bring myself, and uh, and even the companies that I had worked for previously, even not as a consultant, they would say one thing and said, "Yeah, you have freedom, autonomy, etc." And you felt great, you felt very empowered. And then the actions behind those words really weren't correct. And this is the prime example. So I remember working at this one company. There is a point to the end of this, by the way. um, and this new guy came in very much like, oh yeah, he's stamping his territory. He's going, yeah, you all know what you're doing. He said, yeah, you all have autonomy. You know what you need to do. You're not children. You can do all this. And it's like, wow, great, amazing. And so the project that I was on at the time required me to travel somewhere, and there was a low cost flight. It was less than, I think it was about €80, and I was like, right, okay, well, I'll just book the flight, and then I'll just charge it back as an expense. And it's like, no, no, you need to get approval. Ah, okay. So, and I was like, okay. So then what happened is I had to get approval, like send that to my boss, who then had to send it to this big boss. And what happened is that delay between that took 3 weeks. And by the time
Oh,
that got approved, it was, the price was so close, like to the date, it was something between 250 and €300. And then that boss came to me and, or I think he said it in the email, said, "You've left this far too late. Um, you know, don't let this happen again. Now we've had to pay all of this." And it became all this bureaucracy, politics, and all of this stuff. And it started me into this world of, where does all of this work, all of this structure, hierarchy, politics, and everything, where does that actually add any value? Because I don't. I just feel, and and once you can see it, you see that there's so many people that are so brilliant at their jobs, but they're surrounded by all of this structure and hierarchy that actually, if you took a lot of that away and had the freedom and autonomy to do it, life would be a lot easier. They'd probably be a bit more creative, come up with ideas, experiment and enjoy their work. But often we put all of these layers and all these things in that don't add value, but somewhere along the lines, we've felt that that was necessary for some sort of control or something like that. And again, it kind of brings you back to that being a child. You go, oh, I thought I had all of this freedom and autonomy, and you don't. And so, we spoke a few weeks ago, and I'm very, I have a very small understanding of Teal, and we talked about it. But in what I loved about the way that you described yourself is you had this break, and distance from a day to day thing gives you such a different perspective. When you came out of corporate world and then you went back in and you've had that break and you go, oh, not a lot's changed, or it has got worse in some way, it does give you that perspective. And so I love it when I come across people like yourself who have that ability to look at a situation and see all of those things that are no longer working. And it's often quite sad because the people actually doing the job are so close to it and doing it day in, day out, that they don't see that these are actually problems that aren't adding any value. So apologies for taking the center
no,
stage
no,
for all
no.
of that, but I think it's important
Blessing.
just for you to understand where my mindset is. So pick apart anything you think I've got wrong, you think that's accurate. We can go in any direction. Anything you want to pick up on any of that?
Your experience is what the majority of working adults experience every day, unless they're in the upper echelon of a company. The layers of management have gotten so complex, and and we function in our work lives in a very narrow band, unless you have an extraordinary organization. Um, where we've given ourselves procedures and SOPs and all sorts of stuff where we have to toe the line every day. We have to walk very closely inside a very narrow path. And we're not encouraged to explore or bring ourselves, our whole
Mm.
selves, into our work environment where eh, we're asked to work a separate way than what we normally would think. The hard part is that when a company hires an individual, they usually pick the brightest of the bunch, the brilliant people. And so thank your lucky stars that you got into this organization. And then your experience that you had once you were inside the organization was far different from the environment that you were hired in. Now you have to walk that narrow road every day. You're not allowed to stray from the path. If you do, you have to ask for lots of encouragement or the okay from levels above you, and you're basically not allowed to make decisions that even impact your own work world. You don't have control of your own processes. I mean, you might have on your desk, but how you interact with other people is basically managed for you, and you still have to stay within that small little confine. But today's organizations are changing, and this is where um, my passion for teal organizations has just grown over the years. Everything started off when this gentleman called Frederick Laloux wrote a book and was published in 2014 called Reinventing Organizations. And in there, he had the different kinds of structures that we have. Our organizational structures go from all sorts of different uh, types of organizations and what they're allowed to do within that type. And so over here, we might have red organizations, which are some of the, if you would look at it in today's world, and we do have organizations in each one of these categories, it would be like the mob boss. You will do this for me, or I will break your thumb, or I will, you will be killed and you'll have concrete overshoes, and we'll throw you in the river. So it's like you're destined to do anything and everything for that one boss, and he has ultimate sway in everything. So there's not much leeway of making any calls for yourself, and you're stuck in this place with this one individual at the top that has all power, and you have none. It's a zero sum game, and it's hard to navigate in that. And by and large, we still have organizations that function that way, but they've gotten better over the ages. So then the next color, if we're talking about colors, and we'll just go through the lineup of colors of each type of organization. The next color after red is amber. And that is today's hierarchy organization, the normal org chart with the CEO at the top. And, people are kind of aligned all the way down. There's a couple people that maybe have more power than others. But the power structure goes right down the middle. And then the regular people are at the bottom and they don't get to do much at all. They get hired for their skills and they stay in their skills basically the entire time, unless you have somebody that's a brilliant person who can see further. It's just the basic CEO and then hierarchy. So that's the secondary color. The third one is orange, and that is what we see in most of Europe and most of the United States for sure, is that it's a matrix organization. So, and I like to talk about matrix organizations like this. These are the divisions in the organization, and these are the departments. And as you can see, at the crux here of every place is the employee. Well, if you have that matrix organization, you're going to have more than one boss. And
Mm.
then determining which boss you want to, follow or do things for. Um, y- you're conflicted, you know, in every sense, and you're fought over for resources. Yeah, you're a resource. I want this person on my team. I have this new project that's starting up, in a week, and I want this person on my team. Well, no, you can't have them because they're working on mine, and this thing's going to go on for like 4 more weeks. So it's like, then there's this back and forth on the internal side of the organization trying to figure out who's going to do what, where. And the employee is so stuck. They're like, I have to wait until they finish their discussions before I can figure out what I'm supposed to be doing. And then And then there's the same problem as you're hired for one position. You may or may not grow out of that position at all. By and large, you're there to fill um, your activity that you are good at for the company. And so when we talk about matrix organizations, the power is up here at top, but in the division leaders have more power than the department leaders have. And so there's a constant pull for politics, company politics, silos erupt. People are very, um, they don't want to share resources. They want to keep resources to themselves. It's, again, a zero sum game. We don't get to move out of our positions at all, even if we've morphed into something else. And so we, as employees, especially at the bottom tiers of an organization, don't get to really expand our capabilities, even if we have expanded our capabilities inside our brain. So, and that was one of the things that I noticed when I was in a company like 3 companies ago, is that no matter what I did, I would never get promoted ever. Didn't matter. I didn't have a degree at that time, though, also, so that wasn't good. But and that was the hard thing. It was like promotions were withheld from lower tiers, and how you ever got into an upper tier at another time in the company was very, kind of didn't happen very often. So you're stuck again at the bottom of the organization, not maybe being able to do what you'd want to do, or what you're called. You feel like your soul is called to do,
Mm.
and so we kind of tend to just come to work every day, do our jobs, and then go home. We work for a paycheck. We don't work for um, the the furtherance of the company as much as we could. There are lots of things that we could actually contribute to the company, but we haven't been asked. So it's like you're, again, just very stuck. So then the next color, we go up just we only have 2 more colors left, so that's good. The next color that happens in organizational structures is called green, a green structure, which is it's still the matrix organization, but it has employee empowerment sprinkled on top of it. So you get things like beanbag chairs, foosball tables. You have the feeling that you have some company or employee empowerment, but when it gets down right to the nitty gritty, it's still the matrix, and there's still the power politics at the top. And so there's a feeling that you might be able to have more decision making in your sphere of influence. But when it comes right down to it, that really isn't the case. And so green organizations, they're focused on profitability. Matrix organizations are focused on profitability by and large. Um, and at the same time, you have the employee empowerment piece that pokes its head in every once in a while, tries to give employee empowerment a little bit, but then it, the pendulum swings back towards profitability. So there's this continual pendulum swing of valuing people for who they are, giving them a little bit of empowerment, but not going all the way to letting them be able to do as much as they could do inside your organization. So we still have the matrix order of power, but yeah, it seems it seems good until you understand that there is a fifth type of organization, and that's where we talk about teal organizations. And teal is a color; it's this color scheme all the way through. And it's easier to talk about organizations in that way as to how they're built on the inside. So we had the gang, we had the hierarchy, we had the matrix, with employee empowerment. Now we have teal. So Teal is considerably different. Um, and we experience it in different ways. So the strange thing about Lelou's book is that he self-published the book, never thought it would be going anywhere at all. The concepts in it talk about how we've experienced Teal organizations for the last 30 or 40 years. And then he set about trying to find some of these companies that that would fit what he was experiencing as the model. It was emerging as the model. So Teal has three different tenets. The first being all work on the inside of the organization is done by small self-managed teams of 10 to 12 people. Usually 12 people is the maximum in the team. Even though an organization can have 100,000 employees, the majority of the work inside the organization is done by the small self managed teams. And they have complete autonomy. They can make hires, they can fire, they can promote within, they can give bonuses, they build their own policies that work well for that team. And then as they work together inside the larger organization, they can lend members to other ad hoc teams, or they can mesh together to create or build things on the inside of an organization that you could not build just by the normal 12-person team. So all the work is done by self-managed teams who make the decisions themselves, which is kind of astronomical thinking if you're going from a matrix organization with no power at the bottom, all power at the top. And now these small self managed teams have all power. Wow. Really?
Yeah. As you were saying that, it's really strange because I think I've been brainwashed because I was like, so in this 12 people, who's the manager? And it was like, but that's not the point, Colin. And I knew the answer, but
Oh,
it's it's self-organized because I would imagine, right? And
yeah.
it's very interesting because you know, thank you for describing that because that's really helpful. I've never seen it all described like that. When you just as a side thing, the Matrix, is that like the Matrix, the film, as in that you think that you have
Oh,
control or
no.
not, or it's just the Matrix as in?
No, the matrix of an organization. So you have like segments in the
Yeah,
organization, or each location of the organization um,
yeah,
is a fair point. So no, it's not the same kind of matrix as the
yeah.
movies.
It's just you're living in a world that you think you have control
Yep.
and you have none. Um,
Yep.
but yes, for this till is I it's really strange because I always think of this example. Wherever I've worked, you've often had managers, and again, I don't want to start bashing people, but this middle management layer often is either not required or it's creating this um, layer of complexity that doesn't need to be there. That's
Right.
one of the things that I've certainly seen, and I always realize there's something going on. So whenever I've worked somewhere and you've got a manager on a team and they go away for a 2-week holiday and miraculously everything works fine. And you
And
go,
sometimes it
oh,
works more fine.
exactly. And but the biggest thing for me is that it's not the work that gets done, it's the way that it gets done and the attitude. Because what you find is that people within there, like there's more people that are naturally. I don't want to use the word leader because I think that's very misinterpreted, but maybe would take some ownership for something. Other people are more, okay, just tell me what to do and I'm happy to do it. But that's found quite organically between these people and it's sort of
Mhm.
selecting in those roles rather than someone appointed. You kind of go, okay, this is the stuff, and everyone pulls together, everyone gets it done. But it's not about the jobs or the tasks that gets done; it's the way it gets done and the enjoyment within that team. And I've seen it. Everyone's really happy, really like, yeah, yeah, that's cool. Let's do it. Everything gets done, even when problems crop up, like nothing's that important. We seem to think everything is super important, but it's not unless it's life or death. Then it's not, you know, there's a learning behind it. If something goes wrong, etc., you can always apologize for it or whatever. But what happens is they all come together. They all go, okay, yeah, I'll take this. I've got this, and they share it. But the attitude, the enjoyment, the pleasure, and miraculously, these people find like a lunchtime, and they'll probably go at the end of the week and celebrate. But then you can really notice it when the boss comes back. Like there is a massive change, and you go, oh, and then oftentimes you find some emails coming in from the boss and stuff like this, and they want the power. And again, I know there's many different scenarios, but I've seen it so many times before. But for me, it's a real indicator that there's something wrong. That there's the way it was before. You don't need that manager, and I think managers, again, it's hard to describe because we can go down so many rabbit holes of, what a manager is, leader, etc. And, maybe we do a round two and sort of dig into that. But the reality is most people know what needs to be done. They are happy to take ownership and take that. But the dynamics prior to that do not allow for it. And so it's such an insight into how things really do very well without that manager or whoever, supervisor, whoever you want to call it. Uh and it actually works so much more efficiently, and it's the attitude, and people are happier, and that's my experience. Is that how you've
Ex-
seen it?
That's exactly it. The confines of a job with a boss, and especially if it's a middle manager, unfortunately, um, we have these power dynamics that are, and it's, I don't want to blame middle management ever at all because we have forced ourselves into a mold.
Hmm.
We're supposed to have the CEO at the top and these department and division managers. And we're supposed to have middle managers to, oversee us and do things. Well, these are constructs from the late 1800s, and it's like we've just acquiesced to the model. And it's like, what is, but there's more to this. And like we talked about before, you don't hire the middle of the range people for a job. You hire the cream of the crop always. I mean, if you came into a job, if you were the hiring manager and you hired people who were just like C players or B minus players, you wouldn't be doing your job. You want the cream of the crop. And so to bring these people into your organization and yet to stymie their thinking and their ability to work beyond what you think they can work, it's a travesty. We're
Mm,
wasting brains. We're wasting the people that are inside our organizations, and they want to be used to the fullest. And there's no employee on earth that says, "Oh, I just want to be used marginally." No, no, I want to make a difference here. I love this company. I want to do the best I can for this company. But if we keep people on those lowest levels there and have managers over them that don't see their worth, that's one of the pieces of middle management. Say, and that is changing. I mean, the employee empowerment thing, that's a step up from a regular matrix organization. But middle managers were created. I don't know if you've ever heard of, oh, the guy's name escapes me. Why is that? Frederick Winslow Taylor is the guy who created scientific management practices back in 1880s, 1890s, and that went all the way through, I think, 1914, something like that. It was when that whole era ended, and yet we've kept it going. where managers are hired because the people at the lower rungs of the organization are purely stupid. That was what he would say if I had my little thing up here. And there's a quote that just it kills me. People that handle pig iron have to be the most stupid people in the world because you can't you can't give them you have to be able to give them instructions in order for them to do their work. Where actually the people that were making pig iron in those days, if you had let them have control over their processes, they would have come away more productively, just better able to do their own chores than to have this person that's above them dictate this is the only way that you're going to do it. And
Mm.
so those thoughts still permeate our souls in the corporate world, and it's going away in America. So before I go, I want to make sure I get the other two tenets up there of Teal. So the first one is things are done in small self-managed teams that they do all the work. They may have help from other teams on the side. But then the second tenet is that you bring your personal wholeness to your work. So meaning, so if you would see me right now, I might look like I'm, very professionally dressed on the top. But if you looked at my feet, you would be like, what? She's wearing blue tennis shoes. So, but this is how I show up inside organizations. It's like, this is me being Teal. Number one, I don't want to trip over anybody as I'm roving around doing, our workshops. Number two, I want to make sure that you're safe so that if I trip over you, I don't fall on top of you either. Um, and I'm more sure of myself in tennis shoes. So I bring my whole self even into my workshops, even though the only part of it that you might see is the tennis shoes.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, that's kind of weird. Um, the other part is you just get to be yourself every day, and there's no corporate mask that you wear. A lot of us come to work every day and we have to put on this mask. It's very professional, very, focused on the company and your tasks at hand. But what if you're having a bad day? How do you show up? You know, you still have to put on the mask. You still have to do your chores. But you can't be yourself and saying that I'm having a bad day um, or this part of me is calling to my soul right now and I need to pay attention to it. So there's that piece of you just be yourself. That's freedom in any respect. As being yourself is the most that you can ever call on yourself to be. And then the third tenet of Teal is that the organization itself has a life of its own. And so we want to listen to its evolutionary purpose is what it's called. When I first started my company, I thought I was going to be a lean office consultant. Then I went into a coaching place, and then I turned toward the teaming elements of life, and that is where I'm the most effective. I see people, and I see people inside teams, but it's that piece of me that changed from the lean office consultant to the coach to the teaming consultant. That's my evolution inside my company. So if I were to say, no, I'm only doing lean office consulting, we're not doing anything else. But if the other things are calling to me over here, it would be ridiculous of me not to follow that and find out what was there to explore. And so each company has that same evolution. And it's
Yeah.
up to us to listen, and it's up to all the employees to listen to what the company speaks. And so Teal organizations have those three things. They have self managed teams, personal wholeness, and company evolutionary purpose, those three things. And when Lulu wrote his book, he was surprised that there were these companies out there, and they've been out here for 30, 40 years already. And worked like that for a long time. And many of these companies that he researched had 10,000 or more employees that worked like this. Some companies have one or another of the tenets. They don't have the full all three. And there's no reason that you have to have all three. And most companies are in a teal journey if they decide that they want to go this way. By and large, and you'll hear this in America, it's called the Great Flattening here, but really it's removing the layers of middle management, getting rid of them. However, that doesn't mean that you get rid of the employees. So the employees, the middle managers, now get to choose where they want to be. There's a lot of people who have been promoted into a management capacity simply because it was the next evolution of them. You know, they may not want to be a manager. In fact, they may not have even the talents to be a manager. And in fact, that would be a travesty to waste that person in a management role when they could be more effective doing something else that they absolutely love. But it's also a travesty for the employees that are under them, because usually a manager who doesn't like being a manager doesn't show up very well for their employees. And so it has this two pronged um, piece to it where removing middle management can actually redeploy these people into the places where they would rather be. How
Right.
happy would you be if you were put in a position where it fed your soul now and your brains, instead of just being plugged into one thing that you had to stay there forever? So, Lulu, when he wrote the book, he never realized the impact that it would have on the world, because his little book. I mean, it's not a little book; it's about 400 pages long. I want to say, filled with just tons of research. It got out in the universe, and by the time 2024 came, that's a couple years ago for us, but 10 years for the book. That book had sold over 1 million copies worldwide, and it had been voluntarily translated into over 20 languages. So it's become a movement, and we're seeing it play out so much more in Europe than we do in the United States. But there are a lot of companies that are starting to understand what it is, and there are groups all around the world that meet to trade teal knowledge. So we're not just talking about small companies and small places. One of the largest companies in the world is in China. That's an actual teal company, which is just flooring to me. I love it. It's Haier, Haier, and they manufacture refrigerators, appliances for the home, major manufacturer of appliances. But they're teal. They're teal. They have I forget. It's got to be in like the 50, 60,000s or something, or maybe it's even higher than that of employees. But they're all in these small little teams, and they thrive together in that environment inside China even, which is just I love that fact. And I love the fact that this has become not just a something that we wish for, it is becoming a reality. We're in the midst of looking at creating repositories of information worldwide. People can access them. Talking about starting a certification system for teal organizations, teal consultants, just all sorts of different things that are going to help the movement and get us out of the old days,
Mm.
get rid of Taylorism, get rid of scientific management that really didn't do much good except to build in this new middle management piece. It's time that we started working without complexity and start being ourselves and working with all that we have, bringing all that we have into the world and into our organizations. How much would that free us up to be who we are naturally and
Yeah.
apply our strengths and talents?
It's you've said so much. I'm not sure where to really start with it, but I think something one of the reasons I started doing this job, I was actually let go of my previous job, which um they wanted me to do something. They wanted me to go back to being a consultant, and I didn't want to do it. So it was a misalignment with my
Mm,
internal values. And I remember they wanted me to do an interview. Something felt off for me for about a week, and I had the interview, and the feedback from the interview was, yeah, he clearly doesn't want the job. But it was more this internal struggle that I had,
mhm,
and I couldn't work out what was wrong. It felt almost like I was a bit ill or something. And then I realized, oh, okay, the company wants me to do this, but it doesn't feel right for me, and it was very unsettling. Not that I was going to be sick, but I couldn't realize. And I was like, oh, my values against what I want for myself, against what the company wants, are very misaligned. And but this, uh, I've seen it for a number of years now. That, and I think COVID was one of those things that really highlighted it. And I don't think it meant, well, obviously COVID wasn't meant to do that, but I think people don't fully understand. So with the remote working part, people started to go, wow, this is amazing. Companies that believed that they could not possibly work remotely started to seeing a massive uptick in
mhm,
their productivity. But beyond that, and I had a conversation with a lady, Sasha Farley, and we talked about, she runs sort of remote teams and helps companies do that. Um, but what I actually see as part of that is that because you're doing remote working, you're in charge of your time, your energy, how you work. And there wasn't this expectation to be um, at your desk at any minute of the day, especially because people had to homeschool their kids for a while. There was this much, all the barriers, all these expectations of, okay, you've got to be professional, like you said, this professional barrier of, okay, this is the corporate way, this is the professional way, all went away. If there was a kid on a Zoom meeting, everyone's like, yeah, that's cool, like, whatever you need to get done. And then I think there was obviously the call back to being back in the office, and a lot of people really struggled with it. And I understand that, but what I think most companies really miss is that people are happy to come back to work, and I think there is this reluctance to go and see people and be with other people. I think sometimes we've gone a little bit far and we try to be a bit too reclusive. We, as I believe, as human beings, we really need that human interaction. Even
mm,
if we think we don't, there is this energy exchange. Even if you kind of get annoyed with your colleagues or whatever, there is this thing that we gain from being in
mm,
person. But companies started pulling everyone back, and what they lost was that autonomy over their time, their energy, the way that they work. And that's the thing that I think they've really struggled with. But it's very hard to voice that as an employee, because oftentimes we see, right, okay, employer, employee, we're paid to do a job and we don't have these rights. But the reality was, people could go, yeah, look, and I always say this, people go, oh, well, you're just at home, you're doing the washing. And you go, yeah, that may be all right. But the thing is, it takes me 10 minutes to go and do the washing. But while I'm doing the washing, which is a very monotonous thing you don't really think about, you could be away from your desk thinking about, I have this problem at my desk, but I couldn't solve it. Oh, I'll just go and do the washing. Miraculously, because your brain is not sitting behind a desk looking at a computer screen, forcing a solution through like a square peg, you go and do the washing for 10 minutes. Oh, I found a solution because I've been inspired by the round hole in terms of the washing machine. Like, I know it's a silly example, but the reality is that
no,
is as simple as it is. Your brain is somewhere else and your mind is somewhere else. And So, and we do all of this pretending at work. We pretend that we're busy because we want a pay rise. We don't want to be beaten up or like, so sort of beaten up, not physically, but, sort of told that you're not working. The reality is, and even me I would say I'm quite hardworking. There are moments where I have just sat there, just changing tabs on my browser, pretending like I'm going from one application to the other, really just looking at the clock going, yeah, I can't really start that deep work that I need to because I've got about 20 minutes left. There's no point. The reality is I would have much rather just said, yeah, look, I'm going to go home now. And the feeling that you go, yeah, I've grabbed 20 minutes of time that I didn't think I had. I went home, but maybe on the walk home, I would have found a solution or thought about something differently. But
Mhm.
we're not allowed to do that. It has to be, okay, look, this is the clock. This is when you
Yeah,
have to be here.
this is the box.
Yeah. And I understand, there'll be people maybe listening to this and go, well, no, people can't be trusted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
The reality is so many people can be trusted, and the people that can't probably don't enjoy their job enough. And there's
Mm.
a reason for that because they've not got the autonomy, or they fell into that job and they don't like it. Well, naturally, those people won't like to work in that way. They'll find another place, or you have a conversation to say, yeah, look, maybe this isn't the fit for you. We'll do everything that we can to help you find another job. But inside this company, no. And we're always scared to make these things go, oh, no, we can't let them go. It's terrible. There's a whole ream of things behind that. But we spend so much time in work. And as you said, I truly believe that most people want to give to the company. They want to sign up to something that they believe in. They want recognition. They want to play a part. They want to be rewarded. They want all of these things. Um, so there might be a small percentage of people that don't want to work or don't fit in that company, but that's a natural sort of selection thing that I guess happens over a period of time. You go, look, you know, if you've got 5 people in a team and that one person is really that person that's just not doing what they're supposed to, the other 4 would just go, well, look, come on. And then you go, look, okay, look, this doesn't work. Either, what's missing? And you have an open conversation. Okay.
Yes.
And you go, well, okay, maybe you fit in another department, you,
Right.
you know, not trying to get rid of that problem, but just go, okay, what is it? Have that open conversation.
Yep.
And there's this other point that I keep using this example. It keeps coming up in these type of conversations that, and it's really strange because just before we click go live, you said it was the introverts podcast, and I love that. But the thing is, what I found about myself. So people might not believe this, but I'm actually quite introverted in a way. I don't necessarily like labels. So I can actually be on stage. I'm not really not really a showman. I don't really have a problem with being on camera. I'm really okay with this. But after this, I'll probably need a bit of quiet time. I need to go back into my shell. And I remember doing this training. We did an all day training in front of people I didn't really know that well. You would have thought I was the most outgoingest person. But the moment that training finished, people were hanging around wanting to do chit chat. I just wanted to leave. I just wanted to go and crawl back into my shell. And so I tell you that because people will assume that being on camera is, oh, Colin's outgoing, extroverted. No, there are moments where I can be extroverted, and that is weighed up with the ability to ask questions and be curious about these subjects.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, the example that I use is that everything sort of normally fits into a box. Okay, I'm hired in. So let's just say it's easy, hopefully easier for people to understand. Quite simple terms. Let's say you work in a company and there's about 4 different departments. One of those is probably going to be sales because most companies need sales in order to sell their product and be profitable. Say you work in the sales team. So if you took me as an example, you go, right, okay, well, maybe I can be extroverted. I don't want to be extroverted for 5 days a week. I find that very tiring. But that's how it works. You go, right, we're hiring for someone in the sales team. But maybe actually, I would like to be introverted some of the time. Maybe I could just like to stick my headphones on and just be coding in the background in a dark room, in a cupboard or whatever for a couple of days or 3 days a week. But
That's
that doesn't exist. Only in very small companies where you kind of get to touch maybe a few different roles. But the reality is those things don't, because we're all in these boxes. This is sales, this is development, etc. But the reality is I would love to see that, because we aren't just these one things. And
exactly.
I would love to see that, because, and the reality is people go, oh, well, how could you do that? And I, I, I even think about it myself. People go, oh, how can you compare, like, you're being paid this, etc. But you go, but what I see is that you go, someone who is in the sales team and someone who's in the development team, this guy or lady gets to speak to maybe clients and really understand what the clients want. Maybe the rest of the week they get to develop, and there's like, it's all connected. But we like these boxes. We all want to sit in these boxes. And I think it's very sad. And and to your point about the middle management, I've seen it so many times where the way that people were rewarded for being excellent at their job was to be promoted. And it was a way sometimes to give status or recognition, but also the only way that you could earn more money was to take that job. And so you then are trapped. You don't want to go down, you don't want to lose money. I think people might be okay with losing status, but there's an ego attached to status, I often find. But the reality is, so I remember doing this work. I was working with a number of HR teams a couple of years ago, and one of these big companies, a big steel company, and the lady said, we spend so much on management training. Like they showed me the budget figures for management training was absolutely ridiculous. It was like, I want to say, like in millions.
Mm,
And then there's other training for other stuff was not. And I was like, why is that so different? They go, well, we need that because people aren't naturally managers and they need all of this stuff. And you go, so you're forcing people into this who are not naturally that. Yes, there will be those people that are good and they just need some support. But ultimately you've created this massive problem of needing to train up managers because they're not naturally that. Wouldn't it be much better to look at that and go, why have we done that? And again, you know, we always think there's one type of management or there's one type of leadership. They're all different. They all exist differently. They're all their own organism. Yes, there's some concepts that you can take and just things that are useful, but we don't. We go, right, okay, you need to be this way. You need to do these type of reports. You need to do this sort of 360 reviews. This needs to happen, da, 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 and you need to fit into the system. Really? No. And most people that I know, the consultants, really dislike appraisals or anything like that because they know their value. They're not really interested in it, and they've become consultants because they don't want to have to be appraised. They go, "Yep, I like what I do. I know what I'm good at, and I'm going to do that." And you go, "Okay, I don't need to be appraised." They're pretty secure about that thing. There's so many dynamics in all of that in companies and all this busy work, all these things that just don't really need to happen. And that's, again, shoot me down anything that you feel is incorrect or misaligned. But that's my view. But ultimately, I believe exactly like you. People want to give their best. They want to
true.
show up as themselves, but they
Yes.
are given no chance to do that, or
No.
the tiny chance. But companies would succeed so much more. Just imagine the drop in people showing up sick or leaving the company because they actually want to be there. It would be so much different, right?
The hard part too is that a while ago, one of my mentors brought me this knowledge that I never knew existed, but it was evidently a book written in 1990s somewhere that talked about grinders, minders, and finders. And I didn't know anything about this, but most of the service organizations in America were built around this model of grinders, minders, finders. So when you start a new company, everyone is a grinder, you know. Everyone does every kind of job. It's like all hands on deck. Do you want to do the marketing for this thing? Yeah, I'll do it. Fine. You want to do the website or whatever, all these different pieces. Everyone just throws all their talents together and it gets done. And so everyone's a grinder. Everyone's doing everything they can. But as the company grows, I think it's into the 5-year mark, then things start getting a little differentiated. So, whereas at startup you have 100% grinders, at 5 years you have 80% grinders and 20% minders. Now, the minders are the management people, you know. So, 20% are the people who become the CEOs and the C-suite people and like the middle managers and that kind of thing. So, and then in another 5 or 10 years, you start having finders. So finders are the salespeople. I'll go out and find our clients for us, and then bring them back. But the finders people are found inside the minders, not the grinders. That 80% of the employee population stays grinders, and they don't get to morph. They don't get to grow. And so they don't get promoted into a minder situation, and they certainly don't get promoted into a finder situation. And then it gets even more differentiated if it gets another 5 years or something, that only 5 to 10% of either the minders or the finders go on to become the actual C-suite people. And they keep getting promotions, getting more and more promotions until they're, at the very top of the tree. So I happened to ask this mentor of mine, I said, well, where did you see me in that? Oh, you're a grinder. That was the worst thing you could have said to me, was that I was stuck. I was stuck being a grinder in that 80% of the population there that will never become anything other than a grinder. To me, that was a blow to myself, to my ego, to the piece of me that I could give to our organization. I know I was good at grinding. I could grind out contracts. That's what I was doing in that day and age. I just typed contracts and negotiated contracts and, got everything working, all the bits and pieces of it all together. I was great as a grinder. But this was in the same part of my life when I was going back to college in my 50s, and finishing up my degrees.
Mm.
And it was like, in my mind, I have more to give. I have more to give from my college days, these new college. I mean, I graduated. Oh, I think I graduated with my master's in 2014. So I'm still a very recent graduate. But and the fact that I couldn't contribute the way I knew I could now that I had extra knowledge, and that I would never become more than a grinder. That was a travesty. How many of us go through that, finding out of ourselves that we could actually accomplish more, but we're still stuck in our box? It's We're wasting the people, we're wasting the talents and the strengths that we all have. And when I do teaming consulting, that's one of the very first things that I do is I have people find out who they are. Whether I give them a personality test or not doesn't matter. The thing is that they need to know who they are first, and then to find out what they can contribute to the company. And then we start like building the team. So what can I contribute to this team? But also at the same time, we have bits and pieces of us that were built way back when we were young that still infiltrate our beings now. Um, I grew up in an abusive family, put it that way. Um, and I regularly got yelled at. I guess I'm kind of a renegade, I guess, or something. But anyway, I got yelled at constantly, and I knew that eventually that I couldn't talk back. I would just have to stand there and take it and try to let whatever was going on go in one ear and out the other. And I thought that once I got into the corporate world and stuff, all that would go away because it was in my family of origin. I was very young. But what I found, especially in a couple of my organizations, was that my direct supervisory boss turned out to be just like that abusive parent and would start yelling at me. And unfortunately, we have these little bits of our brains, that the amygdala, which holds our emotions, and it's a fight, flight, or freeze or appease component. When I would have a boss of mine, even if I had legitimate things that I needed to bring up that would actually be detrimental to the firm if I didn't bring it up, what would happen is once that person started yelling at me, I would have the same modus operandi. I would freeze and I would try to let everything that was happening go in one ear and out the other. And that made me ineffectual as an employee, simply because I grew up that way and I was still stuck in that piece of me. So one of the things also that I do when we do team training is I want people to share a little bit of how they grew up, because that colors us. Even if later on in life we can circumvent the circumstances and it doesn't have so much sway over us later, we have to at least be aware that that piece of us exists, and that in any team environment, if certain pieces happen, we might be able to understand our teammates better
Mm.
once we've shared that little bit of us from, way back in our early days. So, first of all, I want team members to become knowledgeable about who they are. I want them to understand their greatness, the things that they contribute that make the company oh so amazing. But also, I want them to understand their teammates and what fires them up, and then where there might be problems. Without looking at both of those things together, how I'm wired, how you're wired, we can kind of trip over each other. And then we put ourselves into that nice hierarchical or matrix organization, and in which we have rote, we have rote that we have to do every day. And why not blow out every side of every box? Why not let us live how we have been built in the first place? And to see the general brilliance of every person that you interact with, and then to unleash them to do their best good. That's how we can live in a really awesome way together in an organization, just by being ourselves, contributing who we are and what we were meant to do, and then helping each other person in our teams or in our organizations have that same freedom and autonomy to be themselves. So I know I talk a ton, so
No,
I know you have
honestly,
questions, so
no,
go ahead.
I have, and I think the problem for me is that I'm conscious of time, but like, I normally sort of say at an hour 10, and then we'll do a round two, and 100% we need to do a round two because I've got so many questions. But look, just on that last point, I think the way that you described that is so beautiful. I think I've often said this recently. Being self-aware is like a superpower, and
Yes.
I say that I've been through therapy, and I don't say that as a. Sometimes I think, oh, is that like a brag or something? Am I sort of showing off?
Mm,
And it's not that. And at that time, I'd basically moved from the UK to Luxembourg, and I'd left everything and all the security that I knew, my family, my friends, my
mm,
routine, everything. I moved to a country that I didn't know anything about, and my girlfriend at the time, she said, "Oh, you're being, you're being aggressive. Not aggressive as in physically, but the way that I was expressing things was quite like, "Oh, I just really dislike this," and she said, and she felt that that wasn't me. She said, "Oh, maybe you should go and see someone." So I ended up going and seeing a cognitive behavioral therapist, and
Yes.
changed my life because, and it wasn't a weakness. It was just, it started me on this journey of self-discovery.
Yes.
And I think it's such a beautiful thing. And it's really strange because my go-to is that, when I see people that are struggling with stuff, I think, oh, maybe they should go and see a therapist. And the problem with that is that we think that therapy is a weakness, or it's, that you can't handle the world. But actually, my therapist said to me, You're very brave because most people don't want to face those things or aren't curious
Mhm.
enough." And there was nothing in there that I loved it. I absolutely, like, she would set me homework, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm into it." Because the more that you understand what's going on for you, the way that you talk to yourself, the voice in your head, what triggers you, what do you like, or what did you perceive that you like that you don't like? It's almost endless, and I think you have to be a bit careful because it can send you down some rabbit holes. And I think I was looking for excuses or to blame people, and I went through a phase of going, "Oh, well, that's," and I had a very good childhood. But I wanted to sort of say, "Oh, well, that's because my parents didn't, say that they were proud of me." But the reality is I knew they were proud of me. But what I realized was at the end of it that I have control over so much in my life, so much. And I I'm so grateful for the life that I've been given, the good things and the things
Mhm.
that maybe at the time I didn't think were great, because they were all learning experiences. But having been on that journey and having an awareness of what is going on, what actually, it might be something that's serving me, or it might be a subconscious trigger that's something that's popping up. When you're aware, then you have the ability to change it. You might not want to change it, but you also have the ability to change it. And that for me is amazing. And it really started me on a journey to find out who I was, uh, separate from my family, my friends, my kids, everything. It was about me, and that is so interesting for me. And what I loved about the the personality test, I know you do the Clifton Strengths. Is
Oh,
Clifton
yeah, yeah,
Strengths you do?
yeah,
And
Cultural
what I
Strategies.
loved about that is that it's and I've done these tests before, and I've actually done a separate one, which I found hugely valuable for me. But we're not just the results of those tests.
Yeah.
We're so much more. And I think what gets forgotten is that so much more part. There's so much in our background. And I love the fact that you bring that in, because there's so much wisdom and knowledge within that. And I think oftentimes the people that I've met have said, "Oh, this is you," and they put you into those boxes, but it's
Mhm.
not. It's just a sort of an awareness. It's a starting point. And I love that, because the more aware you are of yourself, the more you can understand and share with other people, and the more you can get along, or just go, "Yeah, this isn't going to work for whatever reason." And it doesn't need to be a bad thing. It's a really liberating, free way to understand who you are. And we are complex. We can't, the things that happen to us as children, we saw with a children's brain, yet we
Mhm.
carry those for all of our lives. And we think that we're smart and intelligent adults, but we're still thinking, or we perceived that incident with a child's brain, and we carried it on. And that's where our brains have processed. And, something, we think that a certain way, and then something very minor can come up, and I know it wasn't minor in terms of your childhood, but something that we happened to you when you were a child shows up in the work environment. And the
Mhm.
reality is, the amount of time that we're at work, of course, that's going to happen. Situations, scenarios, yes, it's going to happen, but we forget that. And it goes back to that point that we go to work and we're supposed to sit into this professional box. We're not allowed to have a personality. We've got to fit into that box. And I love the way that you're exploring this in terms of, different ways of working, showing up as a human, different personalities, and just understanding that in such I want to say a zoomed out way. You're looking at the whole, right? You're not just looking at, oh, this is just a way of working. This is who you are as a person, team, your background, everything. And that, what a beautiful way to look at people. Absolutely, and that came through when you were explaining it. I genuinely love that because most people go, "Oh no, look, we're just going to take this, and that's going to define you." But you're not doing that. You're
Mhm.
looking at people, as human, non-judgmental way of doing it, and saying, "Yep, you sharp as you." And how do those pieces maybe fit together? I think that's marvelous, absolutely marvelous.
It's so freeing to think that we don't have to be in the box. And then how does my personhood fit in with all these other people? What can I do and what can they do? What can we give each other? I think that's the crux of it all is the fact that we give each other our goodness. We can give each other our badness too if we want. Um, most people would like to live without that though. And so, you know, part of what we do here is we get the dysfunction out of working together with your team. It's like if we trip over each other all the time, that's not good for us. I've been in at a we're getting off into another thing here, but I've been in teams where I've been stuck the whole entire 2 years or whatever it was. I've been just stuck there, and I couldn't get them comfortable with getting outside their own boxes and seeing each other for who they were. That they We just saw each other for what we could contribute within our own vein of knowledge. But it's like we once you discover that 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 can equal 54, that you understand the infinite ability of the human to navigate, and to just be themselves and contribute their best to whatever they're building. So no one wants to be on a team that is stuck,
Mm.
that can't get along, that has buku problems and can't see each other. They don't even know who they are. It's like, who wants to be inside a team like that? How can we help people understand the things that actually liberate a team, to do their best, to be their best, like contribute like 150% instead of just, maybe 70, if you're stuck. But it's like that the understanding that when we partner with other people, we blow the size of the box out exponentially. Not just, the how many is there? 8 corners? 8 sides of a box? I can't remember it. Is it 6?
No, I
6.
don't know. You're
Oh,
asking the wrong person. My brain goes to mush when you put me on the spot with
yeah,
things like that.
yeah, don't worry. But I think the thing is that we just don't understand that it's an exponential break,
Mm.
not just, 5 people together and they fully understand how to work together. It's that the 5-person team becomes a team of 20. They
Yeah,
they can do things that they never thought they could do before once they see who they are and understand what they contribute. So, a
yeah.
lot more
I
to it.
I the thing is, there's so many questions and so many things that I want to dig into. I think this is such a interesting subject. I'm fascinated by it. I obviously have my own opinions about it. I think definitely around two, whenever we can fit it in. But I, if I'm not
Absolutely.
careful, we'll be talking here for about 3 hours.
I get you. I get you.
But I love it. I think, people are so unhappy, and a big part of that is work. Um, and being able to, like you said, show up as yourself and
Mm,
bring your best self. We all have bad days, that's fine. But um, wouldn't life be so much better, like if you could do that? And
mhm,
so for today, I think it's amazing. I'm sure there's a load of questions that people have, and I would encourage people that if they've listened to this, um, just to send in questions and or maybe reach out to you directly. Obviously, you're the expert. Um, but where should people find you? I found you on LinkedIn, where I find all my guests. But is there a website? Should they come to you on LinkedIn? Where's the best place for
Yep.
people to find you?
You can get our website at Cultural Strategies LLC.com. And you can reach me via email at mricci, RICCI, at culturalstrategiesllc.com. So otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn for sure. And then I have a Substack that kind of is a teaching element for me. So I love to get in on those kind of medium places. So
Amazing. So
it's been amazing to be talked with you.
no, honestly, time has just flown by, and I was looking at the clock, and I was like, "Oh, geez."
Oh,
But I think it's such a fascinating topic, and it's one of the reasons I started these lives because I wanted to bring awareness to people that it doesn't need to be that way. Work can be so much more than that, and
absolutely.
so it kind of aligned with my way of thinking. And I thank you very much for showing up for me today. I've really enjoyed it. It's yeah. Again, you've probably raised so many questions, and I'd like to. I think maybe do a round two, and if people have questions of how to do that transition into a Teal
Oh, sure.
organization, because I think that's quite a fascinating part as well. Because it's like, oh, okay, what would
Good.
work, what doesn't work, and stuff like that. But for today, Margaret, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. You are clearly an expert. You bring a wisdom, but such a human side. And I think that's beautiful because a lot of people in that sort of area would sort of say, "Well, I know all the answers," but you are such a human, caring person with such wisdom, and your knowledge on all of this is just so beautifully explained, and I absolutely love talking to you. Absolutely. So 100% we'll do a round two, but for today, thank you so much for your time. It was a
Thank you so much for
real
having me.
pleasure. All right. Okay,
Appreciate it.
take care of yourself.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye. Hey, it's me again. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Margaret. It was really an eye opener for me, and I really enjoyed it. Someone whose expertise and the way that they think about people really sort of steps beyond what I would say is the traditional way of looking at employees and the way that we work. Now, if you like this conversation, I do 2 to 3 of these a week, and they're uploaded to LinkedIn, to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Now, if you want to get more of these conversations, why don't you subscribe and then you won't miss out? So just hit subscribe. If there's a bell notifications, click that and you'll be notified of the next episode. So thanks for sticking with me. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you've got any feedback, please let me know. Anything constructive, I will take on board. Thank you very much.